welcome to this week's book club episode for Star Wars Catalyst by James Luceno. If you are not familiar with the series, basically we take a Star Wars book, a couple of chapters at a time, dig into the themes, dig into the happenings, and go a little bit by little bit. If you want to check the description, you can see the other books we have done as part of this book club, as well as the start of this book. For today, we're going to be discussing chapters 9, 10, and 11. So we have a little bit of work to do here, but I'm just excited to discuss this stuff with you guys. So let's go ahead and dive in. We have chapter 9, Angry Red Planet. Now the Earthling in me, when I hear Angry Red Planet, immediately goes to Mars, but of course this isn't about Mars, this is about Geonosis, and we see an acid-torn Geonosis. Geonosis is an interesting planet to kind of get to revisit. Of course, we see it a lot in Star Wars. In Attack of the Clones, we get it in the Clone Wars, and then we got it again in Rebels. And we see how this is a planet that really has gotten the snot kicked out of it quite a few times as a result of this galactic war because its factories are so important and its workforce is so important. But seeing the acid-torn Geonosis is interesting because it's not just the after effects of war, but it's also their seasons. You know, this is a very insectoid-like planet with conditions that such creatures and people would live in, and so we see that it has an acid season, which is interesting. Now, in classic Luceno fashion, we get a couple of name drops right at the top of the chapter. We get Sate Pestage, Ars Dangor, and Janus Grijatus, and I probably mangled all three of those names. But two of those names I recognized, one of them I had to look up, and all three of them are characters that existed in Legends canon, and in Legends canon it was kind of thought that they were some of the Imperial advisors you saw in the throne room of Return of the Jedi, though there's kind of various levels of how true that was depending on which character you're talking about, and that's not necessarily true in new canon anymore. But this is a case of Luceno kind of bringing these three characters into this canon as a way to kind of name drop. But those were some name drops just to kind of give you the idea that this is a part of a Palpatine scheme, and he's got some of his best underlings there working on the project. Now the chapter, as we said, was called Angry Red Planet. We get that idea with the acid, we get that idea with the weather, but the people are also angry, and the planet is also red, not just because of the dust and clay on the ground, but because of the people. That we're here during a giant gladiatorial battle, and drones, which would just be male Geonosians, are being slain by the hundreds in this big old fight. It's the same arena that we get in Attack of the Clones, and that's something that Krennic notes and thinks of the Jedi kind of coming in to attack. And it was interesting that he had kind of like a more positive view on the Jedi, because of course right now he's with the Republic, he's not Imperial, and he would see the Jedi as tools and soldiers for the Republic. Poggle goes out to do a speech. He spins this tale that they were tricked, that the Republic is really not their enemy, even though the Republic attacked them twice, and really that Geonosis was duped into helping the Separatists, who never cared about them anyway, and we should actually care about the Republic because they're the real good guys. And it's just kind of showing how we easily... I mean, we see a lot of how the Geonosian population is swayed. Of course, they are this kind of insectoid species we've seen even in Clone Wars. They have this kind of hive mind mentality. Even then, not all of them necessarily agree with Poggle, but we get this idea that they are these very intense people that would slay each other in battle, that the idea of bread in circuses, which is an old Roman thing, is very true for them, that they can be distracted from usurping power they don't like if they get to, like, fight and kill each other in an arena. Now, oddly enough, in the same chapter, we also get Galen talking to Tarkin. And here's where we start to get more of the Tarkin-Krennic intrigue that's really fun. There is a whole Tarkin novel by James Luceno, but Krennic isn't really involved in that because at the time that novel was released, Krennic wasn't really in the picture. Tarkin was one of the first Star Wars novels to be released in the new canon, and Catalyst kind of came around as a result of Rogue One and the creation of the Krennic character. So this is really the book where you first start to see that Tarkin-Krennic rivalry that we would go on and see in Rogue One, and it would play out in books like Thrawn Treason. I love seeing the two characters play off of each other. I love the character of Krennic, and I love how he's always having to go up against Tarkin. So that was something kind of fun to revisit the origins of these two characters, or at least the rivalry between them. Tarkin spins this tale about how Galen's name can't be cleared just yet, but he's going to find a way to do so because of his friendship with Krennic, and he's doing more pushing to get Galen to help. But I was really kind of wondering why this exchange was put in the chapter Angry Red Planet, because so much of this book, the themes have really fit the chapter title. And this was kind of the first time we had a chapter title where I didn't really feel like it necessarily fit. And, I don't really have an answer to that. I'm kind of curious if you guys have any thoughts. Like, do you think this was just included because it was where it went? Or is there some kind of meaning to Angry Red Planet that you would draw from the Tarkin and Galen conversation? But just in general, I like seeing Tarkin as a mirror to Krennic. Krennic is kind of this guy who, came up through academies and has been trying to earn his way that way, where Tarkin was mainly not involved in the Death Star project. They're not calling it the Death Star project, obviously, but not really involved with the Death Star at this time because he was in the Citadel prison, which is also a connection to Clone Wars, which puts us at about season 3 now, for those of you keeping track at home. Then we hit Chapter 10. Chapter 10 is called The Long Calm, which is supposed to sound like the Long Con, I think. But the Death Star is being built without a full plan, which is something I find fascinating. They know they want the station, they know the Geonosians had the plans for the station, but they don't have the weapon. They can build this whole space station, but they don't have what they think is the ultimate use of it, of this, how are they going to make it go boom? That's what Krennic is working on. And that's part of, too, where I really like the rivalry between Tarkin and Krennic, because in a way, Tarkin is in charge of, or at least by the time we get to Rogue One, and what we'll see kind of happen in this book, Tarkin is in charge of the Death Star, but Krennic is in charge of the weapon. So technically, Tarkin outranks Krennic. Technically, Tarkin is in charge of more things, but without the weapon, what's the point of the Death Star? And so then Krennic kind of wields a little bit more clout in that regard because he's in charge of the thing that makes the whole thing worthwhile. It also kind of sets up this idea of they might have an arms race because these plans were originally Dooku's, and so they don't know if the Separatists are building their own Death Star. So it's kind of like, it's more of a race to get this thing built in case the Separatists also have one so that they can use it first. It's kind of a race to the nuclear strike. They're wondering why there is no strike, why Dooku isn't coming after them. And they think it's because they're too busy building their own. But of course, we know it's because Palpatine, who's in charge of both sides of the war, wants this Death Star being built. Also in this chapter, we have Lyra going on a long jog and struggles with the facade of life on Coruscant. It's not that she has a hard time taking care of herself, it's just like everything on Coruscant is fake and everything's even changing. She talks about how she used to go to the temple grounds all of the time, and now the temple grounds are locked down for safety's sake for the Jedi. She mentioned something about fearing that they're disconnecting from the galaxy is going to be bad for them, which of course we know is a thing that's going to become true. So Lyra's really got her finger on the pulse of the galaxy. But Lyra's also finding that she's changing because she's taking care of Jin. She's just not used to having time on her own. And she's kind of unstable, might be a word for it, where she's trying to figure out who she is. She's trying to figure out what's going on in the galaxy, where her ethics fit with this kind of new galaxy, what's going on, to be a little topical with this new normal. And it's rough because she's kind of the moral center. Galen is certainly an ethical person. He's certainly a person with high moral standards, but he's also always got his head in the clouds, and he's not the most focused guy, and he counts on Lyra to ground him. And obviously Krennic is not the moral center, and Jen is just a small child, and can't really be a part of that conversation. So Lyra, who is the kind of voice of reason and ethics and heart in this story, kind of losing her place shows the instability that's going to come from these kind of hero characters in our story. If she's kind of losing her way, what hope does anyone else have? Because she's the one kind of guiding everyone. Lyra's concerned because she's been getting like weird messages from unknown senders, and is it about Galen? Is it some sort of weird misunderstanding that she doesn't it's just a coincidence, but it could sound like Galen, and she's just paranoid. She's in this part, and everything's tense. And then she gets chased down by a pair of Wren. The Wren are a reference to Lucino's Legends novels. He wrote the Agents of Chaos duology in the New Jedi Order series, which we have a discussion about somewhere here on the channel from quite a ways ago. And they're also in another, I believe a Wren shows up in Cloak of Deception, which is another Legends Lucino novel. So they're a species I think he created that he really likes to use. So I don't know if this was their first inclusion into new canon, but Lucina likes to include them in everything. Lyra thinks she's being followed by operatives, and she's really being followed by salesmen, but it just shows how off she is. And then we get Orson calling Galen with a job, and it's seemingly non-military, seemingly a good thing, but it's also a step back for Galen. But it's work, and it's work that's not involved with the war. Galen wants to talk to Lyra about it, but he doesn't really want to turn it down. But it puts him into feeling more in debt to Orson and to Krennic. Galen does make a crack to Krennic about, oh, you're busy, well, at least you have work. So you can see that even though he's a very private man, he is sharing with Krennic, and I think that's an important thing to note, just that he really does trust Krennic, and that there really is a friendship there, and it's not just like Krennic is just weirdly nosing in on all the parties or anything. Now, this chapter being called The Long Calm, there's part of it where I think the pun on Khan is intentional. There's some reason for that I will get to later. I don't want to tip the hat of the book on some stuff. But, it can relate to Krennic always trying to work on Galen. And just the idea of putting the Death Star together, and just everything that Krennic's doing and how it's wearing down on the Ursos. Chapter 11, Mundane Science. Ursos arrive on a new world, which is really kind of a cool sounding world, and it seems perfect for them, but the company isn't. Galen's new boss is really threatened by Galen and continuously wants to put Galen in his place. And it even says that Jen is suspicious of him, which usually small children have a pretty good read on people. And we can see that this is really a position that's going to test Galen to eventually push him closer and closer and closer to working towards military projects. We flip over to Krennic, and we see that he is hoping that Galen is getting bored. He talks about the character of Haas Obit and how he's gone missing, even though he wanted to use him to, take Galen to kind of be able to spy on him a little bit, but he decides that it was better this way, even if he had Haas. But this is just a good reminder that Haas is a character, because this is something that's going to continue to come up. As a part of this conversation, Krennic talks to Poggle the Lesser, because the Geonosians are continuing to act up, basically saying that you have to understand that the drones are just going to fight for work. Even if it seems like it doesn't make sense, or like you're losing your labor force, this is how Geonosians like to act, trust me, and I'm not going to hold you accountable if you kill my people, which personally I think is a little bit suspect, but that is how the chapter's left, or at least with Krennic. And then we go back to the Ursos. Ursos their place is coming under bombardment, the war has kind of found them. Again, I'm sure this was intentional on Krennic's part to kind of put them in a non-military situation, but be involved in a military situation, just to ever continue to push him towards eventually helping with the cause. Galen was lecturing about how math and music are similar when this happened, which is just very classic Galen. As the fight starts, he looks for his family, for Lyra and Jen, but instead has to console a scientist. And we see that as being, just a part of Galen's personality, that he's always looking to help. He is this kind of good soul. As for this being called mundane science, of course, the obvious answer is Galen getting used to mundane science as opposed to big theories and everything. He's literally just making stuff. His boss doesn't want him to revolutionize anything or change anything. And then with Krennic, he's just going through the ins and outs of building the Death Star. But that's what I have to say this week. Please leave me a comment telling me what you think so far. For next week, we're going to go ahead and finish part 1. So that is going to be chapters 12 and 13. And 12 and 13 will wrap up part 1 as we make our way through this book. And I will be very happy to talk to you guys about that. If you're not already, please follow us on all the socials, and I will talk to you guys next week.